our agenda for today is we will go through CloseReach news with Kevin, as we usually do. And then my colleagues, Kirill and Bruce, are going to show us a vendor management solution that we have developed in QualiWare. So that promises to be very interesting. It will be about 20-25 minutes. There's going to be opportunities. There's a few slides at the very beginning, and then there's going to be a demo. There's going to be an opportunity for questions at the end. Then my other colleague, Michael Rowe, who is our senior developer on staff, is going to give us some more information and a demonstration of Power BI integrations with QualiWare. We've continued to look at how the API works in between Power BI and QualiWare. We've continued to do further additional research, additional development, and as we learn more, we want to share more with you as we learn it. So Michael has an update on that for us today. And then at the end, we will have open forum and we'll talk about what everybody's doing for the rest of the summer. You're all expected to share your plans for the summer and if you've got anything exciting that's going to happen. Because we will be adjourning after today until the meeting in September, which will not be until the 30th. So we will be apart for the next 12 weeks. So we want you all to share what you're going to be doing. So Kevin, if you're ready, we can get started with our CloseReach news.
Sure. We actually started summer a bit early. We had our last week. We had our company picnic.
That is correct.
Yep, up on the river here, and the new rage. I get that the young guys were all playing spike ball. So if anybody's familiar with that, it's was kind of interesting to watch. So anyhow, getting on to CloseReach news events for DAMA. So that's the Data Management Association, National Capital Region. We've submitted Kuno to be a speaker at one of their future Lunch and Learns. I'll get you the dates shortly, but he's going to be talking about how to use ontology diagrams to control security prompts and responses when using AI for creating enterprise architecture models, objects, and relationships. So ontology models and diagrams are something that's been built into the tool for the last 2 releases and is tied into a lot of the open API capabilities. So we submitted Kuno to talk to the local DAMA chapter, and I'll let you know when that's going to run. For those that don't know, we were at Apex, which is the Leadership Summit for government executives, and as a result of we didn't hand out any kind of special treats or anything, but we had a banner there so that people could scan it, and we're making a donation of $1,300 on their behalf to the Royal, and specifically the occupational stress injury, the PTSD clinic there. And I was out in Halifax a little over a week ago, and for a session right on the harbor there with a group called Cove, which is a group of startups, but also tied to the Diana project, which is the NATO architecture framework and NATO connections here to all Canada and all of the partners. And as a result of that, we did the same kind of thing. We're making a donation of $775 to Canada Company. And that's a charitable organization in support of national defense. And specifically, they have a summer camp program for children whose parents are suffering from PTSD. So we're going to be making a donation on their behalf to send some kids to camp for the summer. So thanks everybody who we did see at these events, and we think that's a good cause. We got some training happening. We have a Casemaker project running in late July, a course rather, And it's been a while since we've run that. So anybody who is looking at how we do meta model changes and create new templates and new diagrams, CaseMaker's the way that that happens. Business architecture, we're still scheduled with Roger Burleton for 15th to 17th of September in Halifax. The province of Nova Scotia is our anchor client for that course, and so it's also open to others. And I guess I'm throwing it out there if there's any interest in another course here in Ottawa for the fall. So you can reach out to Cecile, or you can reach out through the CloseReach website through training and talk to us about if there's any interest in your organization. We have some new training and coaching products just coming up with Roger. So besides, we're actually combining his training with some coaching packages. So follow up from that training to help you move down that path of defining your Northern Star, identifying all of the areas that you need to be focused on, stakeholders, using IGOs and things like that. So watch it. We'll send out an email notice for that. People wondering about QualiWare. The latest word we have on the new version is beginning of July. And I have no control over that. We have a pre-release copy that we have been doing some testing on and pushing back any commentary that we have. So more to follow as soon as we get official notice of the release.
I actually had that from two people at QualiWare. So both Kuno and Kevin told me that it was going to be beginning of July. So
perfect. For those that have access to, there's a thing called the Sparks Matrix, and it actually has a section on it about digital twins, DTOs, digital twin of the organization. And so QualiWare is a leader in that quadrant, and a big piece of that, besides the standard components of the tool, there is a piece of that tied to the collaborative business planning add-on to QualiWare. And here you can see the where we score, upper right-hand side. And QualiWare has a special designation there in terms of completeness of the product.
Ace performer.
An ace performer. So there's a lot going on in this space, being able to simulate organizations. So organizations that are going through transformations and want to understand the efficiencies and lean down their processes, but also understand the, how processes interact with resources, whether those are physical resources or people, organizational groups. So being able to build out those sophisticated models to do that analysis. And we're actually just working on, we see I guess, a use case here in digital transformation and in the private sector, mergers and acquisitions. So when you look at an organization and say, how am I going to merge that into my current operations? Doing some analysis up front, in terms of the efficiencies and effectiveness of different parts of the organization that you're looking to merge together or consolidate, can save you a lot of pain on the back end. So we'll be devoting some time to building out that package to guide organizations in how to do that. And within government, I think there's definitely some use for this. We're seeing some big changes. Coast Guard is moving from fisheries and oceans to national defense. When I was out in Halifax talking with some people from the Coast Guard there, they saw they see some big changes coming for them. So we're going to be talking about how they might be able to use QualiWare and CBP to help them with that. Anyhow, I don't know that the new EA quadrant is out yet, but
Not yet.
thought we would share this one with you.
All right, vendor management solution in QualiWare. So last QualiWare user group meeting, Kevin mentioned that we were working on that type of a solution. And the goal is really to manage the full vendor lifecycle, including onboarding of those new vendors directly in QualiWare. And we found that use cases to be intriguing, so we accepted the challenge and wanted to go ahead and see what can we develop in QualiWare and what it's going to look like. And the results actually quite promising. Next slide, please. Why? Well, why did we develop it? So a couple of things. It's a really centralized source of truth repository for the vendor management procurement staff, ensuring that they can find all the information about vendors and contracts in QualiWare. It's a collaboration platform with the key management stakeholders. We've prepared a few roles which we're going to demonstrate for you today, how they can collaborate together and streamline and enhance the vendor management, vendor onboarding process. And finally, it's about real-time data, real-time insights about the vendors, about the contracts, as well as integrated risk and compliance activities and tasks that you guys are aware that QualiWare is capable of. There are two others that I didn't mention on the list, and I thought about it and I should have written down. So I'm just going to spell it out for you guys. One of it is reusing the platform and ultimately reducing the total cost of ownership. I think with us realizing that QualiWare is just it's a more than an enterprise architecture tool, it's also a business management system. So reusing that particular platform for the vendor management purposes and domain, that really reducing total cost of ownership and driving that cost of license lower and lower. The other thing is driving collaboration among teams that have never thought of using QualiWare in the past. So again, we are talking about procurement or vendor management teams that primarily would not touch QualiWare because there was no particular functionality that would spark their interest. So now we're going to showcase you guys how could they actually utilize and maximize that process of streamlining vendor management in QualiWare. And then their business, day-to-day business, realistically. Next slide, please. Key functionality and features. So this is what the dashboard of the vendor management solution looks like. We've developed a couple of views, actually. One of them would be from the vendor management. So vendor management would use that to create and enter the new information about vendors, editing the list of the vendors and contracts, seeing the onboarding information, tracking those active contracts, as well as seeing some statistics and charts and insights about what's happening with my vendors in the repository. We've also built a couple of other views there. You might notice the desktops at the top says risk and compliance assessment and sponsor for vendor management, as well as vendor management processes. So those two others, risk and compliance assessment and sponsor, that's a dedicated role that we have built in QualiWare, and that essentially to ensure that when you do vendor management, you're able to address some of that risk and compliance assessment items that onboarding teams have to do, as well as if there's a sponsor for the vendor management that want to view the oversight information of what is happening with the stock or roster of vendors in my organization, they're able to easily access that data. Next slide, please. Role-based access control. So we've built, as I mentioned, 3 particular roles, which Bruce is going to demonstrate. One of them is vendor manager. That's where we're going to be really spending time on. Risk and compliance officer. This is where they do risk assessments, essentially registering risk related to the vendors or contracts, as well as doing some compliance relevant work, such as seeing if compliance standards match the vendor's specifications and vice versa. as well as vendor sponsor, which I talked about already. So without further delay, if you can go to the next slide, we're going to do a live demo and Q&A. Bruce is going to take over and show you the main dashboard and desktops that our team have prepared. And I'm going to take over at some point and demonstrate you some of the automated workflows that we have for managing vendors and contracts in QualiWare. Bruce, on to you.
Okay, so where I'm going to start, I'm just going to take a couple of minutes and go through the full the vendor lifecycle management. I'm just a minute here. Is that still big enough for everybody?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so everything starts with the purchase request. You're not, this isn't a one-off with staples for papers and pens. These are significant purchases, significant contracts that you would engage with the vendor. So these are the type of things that would come through vendor management typically. So first of all, if there's a request for purchase and we're going to look at, is this something that we already have an established vendor? And if not, we've got to go through the screening process for that vendor before we move on to the contract or the agreement that we want to enter with them. So what would happen would typically the vendor manager or someone from the vendor management team would enter information into the repository, like a vendor list, and they would set that record up as pending approval, because it's got to go through a screening process before it's approved. The vendor management would be responsible for collecting all the documentation that the risk and compliance team would need. Depending on the type of vendor, the type of business, there could be a variety of documents they need. Their incorporation license, financials, insurance type information. So vendor management were responsible for all of that. Once they get the information, that's enough for the screening. Notification would be sent to the risk and compliance team that they're able to begin their assessment. So they would do their assessment. They would provide risks. They would provide any risks that are there, any issues, and then they're updating all this information right within the repository of the vendor. When they're done their assessment, they would send a response back to vendor management saying they were done their assessment. And keep in mind, when I say GFW, that's governance workflow. So when I say send or they receive and they send, that's vendor management will provide their recommendations and submit recommendation, and they'll send to the sponsor notification that the assessment is done. Once the sponsor has that notification, they have two options, because they'll have all this information to review. They would decide to reject the vendor based, maybe it's too high risk, maybe some significant concerns from the assessment, or they would approve the vendor. And once they've approved the vendor, that would flip the status of the vendor to approved. Same with reject. If they decided to click on reject, it would set the status of the vendor to reject for this process. If they approve the vendor, the next step would be to go through and assess the contracts or agreements that they would have to enter with that vendor. Very similar to the screening process, the vendor management would set up a contract within the repository as unapproved. They would coordinate the gathering of all the documentation that's needed for the different type of assessments. They would gather, if it's a security related purchase, they would gather information for IT security to review. And same with again, risk and compliance. They typically do a business impact analysis on these type of services or products that are purchased, to make sure that there's continuity plans are in place if the service is lost, or it's a license and the software goes down. So each of these would do their own assessment. Would do assessment. IT security would do assessment, send a response when they're done. IT or risk would become involved again to do the business impact assessment. And then when they're done, vendor management receive notification that these assessments are done. And once again, the business would receive notification saying the assessment on the agreement or the contract or the purchase request has been completed. Again, the business would review it based on, look at the feedback and the concerns, would either approve or deny the contract. And from that point, if it's approved, it will go to, it will go down to finance to submit a purchase order outside of the realm of this, but this would be finance's decision to, ultimately approve the purchase or not. If they approve, an appeal would be issued and the purchase will go against the PO. And at this point, vendor management would begin to monitor their contracts, monitor expiry dates, monitor notice of in terms of the notification that needs to be given if you're going to terminate your contract, all that kind of thing. Is there any questions on that? I know it's a lot, but I just kind of wanted to show everybody the full vendor management life cycle.
Just a quick comment about all of this process, Bruce. I'll add on that.
Sure.
We took that complex process, as you understand, every organization will have a different procurement and vendor selection processes, but we took that complex process and we tried to create easy to use, easy to understand tiles and dashboards for those key roles to utilize. So again, converting that complex view into the simplified and easy to understand tasks and dashboards. Thank you.
Right.
I think Karen had, just before you go on, Bruce, I think somebody else had their hand up for a second. Was it Karen?
Yeah. Just for clarification, is this software and hardware vendor, or are we talking about services such as if we were hiring a training organization?
This would kind of it would accommodate both, Karen. So if you see once we've got through the screening of the vendor, if we have, when we have an agreement in place, if it's IT related, there's a whole IT security assessment that we would go through or would go through. They would look at the IT, their security protocols, risks, is there any equipment vulnerability? So they go through that assessment. And then it will go up to a business impact analysis. But so if from the service request, if there's no IT request and this is just a pure service request, or if it's an IT/service request, it will go through an IT security assessment, definitely.
Okay, so it's product, services, and hardware, software. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
No problem. So I mean, if it's just a situation where we want to go into kind of a long-standing an agreement where we want to buy computers or we want to buy printers or photocopiers, it may not be an IT request, it may not be a service request. It may just go right through to, this is a regular purchase request, and this, the only stop is vendor management, and it may not even have to go through an IT security assessment or a business impact assessment. They may not have to do that. Again, so it may vary a little bit based on every organization functions a little differently. We would be able to configure this however they would need it to run.
Yeah. So then again, if the vendor on a regular basis was a Brandon Toy for paper stocks, for instance, it would be tailored appropriately.
That's the whole idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Cecile, if you just, I have it minimized, so I'm not seeing hands that come up. So
yeah, I'll jump in if I see. Yeah, I'll jump in if I see something, Bruce. Yep.
Okay, great. So no other questions?
Nope.
Okay. So I'm going to take you to the desktops now. So as Kiro said, we have 3 different roles, one for vendor management, one, and I'm going to show them all by the end of it, one for vendor management, one for risk, and one for the sponsor. So as the vendor management, like we said, they have everything kind of starts with vendor management. They were going to create the vendor, they create the contract, fill out pertinent information, gather all the documentation, and this would be the start. So if Cecile within CloseReach said, hey, we want to enter an agreement or purchase something with vendor ABC, this is where we would enter it. So we could, we just put in the company information here. So the sponsor, who's the sponsor here? So we want to insert, this is obviously Cecile. So let's put Cecile in here. Is your name in here? So there it is. Where's your name, Cecile?
in there somewhere. You might have to search by
I keep
Cecile. There
passing
I
it.
am at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right there. It's for some reason by
Okay.
first name.
The vendor management, we can pick a vendor management, or this get set up where oftentimes vendor management, just the mailbox, and there are multiple people in the vendor management. So we could set it up either way. Risk management, again, you know, if there's someone in particular you need to send it to, or we could send it to, if this is a general risk management mailbox, there's multiple people, we can add whoever we want in here. So let's go all employees, or no, we don't want that. It's Amir, you're the risk manager for us, or you're the vendor manager. Oops. And Anthony will be the risk manager for us. This is just free form type now, the vendor type. And the vendor status right now. So whenever we create a brand new one, it's always going to be pending approval. So then from pending approval, it can be denied, it can be approved or rejected, pretty straightforward. And then associated documents. So when we're setting this up, you may not have them now, but if you do, you want to add some documents to this. I don't have anything set up for this one right now. We're going to go through and show, but these are all external documents that are related to the vendors. So these are just all connections to SharePoint documents, but I don't have anything for this fictitious vendor, so I'm just going to leave it at that, and we'll go through and show a list of vendors with all their documents here shortly. So I'm going to go okay, and the governance workflow engine would then send a notification to, I guess, Cecile, you were the, no, not Cecile, Amir, you were the vendor manager, so you would receive notification that there is something for you to look at. So once we've got the vendor set up, we have a list of vendors we can go to. So we've got vendors in there. We can do a group of, we can look at all the vendors that we have set up, and we can do mass updates. So here's the company, where's the company I just said, Ace Company. So here's the company that I just set up. We can go and we can update them within this spreadsheet. We can update anyone we want within the spreadsheet. What you can update are the vendor status, because that's all handled through the governance workflow. We don't want to override that. And you'll see that any contracts associated to the vendors are listed here, but you can't update those. You've got to update them within the contract, edit tile. So once we've got our list of vendors, we can create risks if we need for these vendors. You'll see this Ace Company that I created. If we're going through and we're looking, assessing this company, and we have a risk maybe we need to create for this company, we're going to create this company's of poor quality. But we can override these if the likelihood of significance isn't correct. If we need to say this is more of a high likelihood and a low significance, we can change those. So nice color coded, easy to see, you know, when you go to pull these up later on. So every risk I've identified here, we'll stay with it, and we've got reports that are going to show. So close on it. We can go to it at any time to view our vendor risks after the fact. This is a view tent. So again, nice colors, easy to pick things out. We can run reports. So these risks are always going to be against these vendors. So anytime we want to run any of the reports, we can run different reports against these. Now contracts, we have, we don't actually have a create contract in here at this point. But if for the contracts that we have created, we have a list of the contracts. So you can see here's the list of the contracts. Here's the approval, the pending approval, the approved. So this is a way of just looking at right now what's outstanding as far as contracts and what have been approved. Again, you can update the contract, all the contracts information within this spreadsheet. Some of it you can't, again, statuses you can't. Auto renewal, that's set as you can't update that it should be. And all the information related to the contract you can update within the spreadsheet. Same thing, you can edit risks that are identified, create and edit risks that are identified for specific contracts. As we're going through the assessment, I can add new risks. This is I want to create a new risk. Let's say this is a defect.
Carol, did you have your hand up?
Just want to provide a quick comment that
Sure.
those spreadsheets are there really for the bulk editing and bulk update and ensure that the right key stakeholders have all of the information in their hand without scrolling through, different Excel sheets that are never up to date. We don't know what's the version controller and so on. Remember, in QualiWare spreadsheets, it's a dynamic spreadsheet. So when we do the updates in one of those cells there, that gets reflected throughout the entire repository. All of the queries and tables and reports that Bruce will showcase you today gets reflected just by you clicking something in one of those spreadsheet cells. Thanks, Bruce.
Oh, thank you. This is loaded. I don't know why it's not saving right now. Seems to be hung up a bit here. Just a minute.
Just refresh the page, go back.
Yeah, there we go. It's hung up, but and we have the ability to look at. So I mentioned that part of vendor management they do is collect all the documentations needed for their assessments. So this is for the vending for those vendors that have been onboarded already. We have an easy access for vendor management to say, okay, here's the vendors, here's the type statuses. Some of them are still pending, and here's the documentation that was submitted as part of the screening process. So the Acme vendor here, this is a link to their documents on SharePoint. So you can integrate this with SharePoint quite easily. So what I've done is I've created all the documents and folders and put them on SharePoint and just created a link through the external documents within QualiWare. So it renders quite nicely here. Same with the contracts. So we have contracts and their assessments through IT security and the business and the assessment, the business impact assessment, all that information. Again, for each contract that you have any of this documentation, same thing. It's all maintained in external documents in QualiWare through Sharewell, and it's linked specifically to that contract. So that these set of documents that you use will be attached and flow through with this specific contract forever. So it's a great linkage between the two. Now we have vendor summary and contract summary. So these are nice. A way of looking where everything sits as far as approve versus the pending or rejected. So you can see right now we've got 9 approved vendors, 3 that are rejected, and 3 pending approval and 2 that are rejected. And you just go over to the list to see where they are. So you can see right now, here's all our approved vendors. Here's the contracts. If there's any that are related at this point, here's the contracts that are related to the vendors, rejected or not, they're all here. And just like, what am I looking for? Just like a pivot table, you can take this information, drag it over here, and sort it differently. So it's like an inline pivot table. Now you have in your contract, you have both, well, that's not what I wanted. I wanted. What was I looking for?
You can maybe pick another column, Bruce, but
Yes.
the end of a line that this is a filtering and sorting table,
Yeah,
right?
so we
As well as a pivot.
We can have all of our approved, it's like an inline, a pivot table, so you can create, here's all your rejected, your pending, your approvals, so it gives a lot of flexibility when it comes to the way that you report this data within these, in these reports. And same with contract summary. If you can go into contract summary, you'll see the pie chart of what's approved, denied, pending. Here's our list of approved contracts, pending contracts, and rejected. Now, I would say probably this would be the most used tile within our desktop. So track active contracts. So this is where I think, vendor management, there's a lot of struggle. In my experience anyway, there's a lot of contracts. There's, in bigger companies, there's a lot of contracts. They have to provide notification before they terminate. They go through past this termination. They have contracts. They have applications that they're paying for. They don't even know they use. So what we have here is this is a great dashboard for looking at all our existing contracts. So here's the contracts. Here's the type. But you'll see we have, is it auto renewed or not? What's the termination notification date? Well, there's always a date. So a lot of the times you have to provide a 60 notice of termination, or you automatically get renewed and have to pay. And that's oftentimes what gets a lot of companies in missing this termination notice date. So this is saying, here's your date. Here's a number of days until your notification is due. And oh, by the way, it's passed. The termination notification date is approaching. So I think right now the threshold is 30 days. So you've got 16 days left to provide your notification. Here's the start date of the contract. Same thing. Here's the termination date. How many days till you terminate? And again, termination or the contract expires soon because we're within 30 days. And you get set that 30 days, 45 days, whatever fits best for you. And this one, you can see it's -3, so the contract has expired.
So, Bruce, I'm just going to comment on this. So this is a great way to optimize all of your vendors as well as optimize the costs associated with upkeeping those vendors, and how many subscriptions do we have in place? How many products are there that we don't need to use or need to use? And then where is this traceability? So that's where you can find that traceability as well as source of truth for you, looking into all of those links associated with contracts as well as vendors. So quite comprehensive. Thank you.
Absolutely. So again, now I'm going to show the different desktops at this point. So if I go into now the role base, so as the vendor manager, I get all of this information. I get everything that everybody gets. But if I am, say, at one of the folks in risk, my role is going to be different in what I need. And this is the information that you're going to see. You're going to see the vendor list. You're going to be able to edit your risks because as the assessor, you're the one providing the risks. You want to, and all of these tiles are on the vendor management as well. You want to mass edit the contract, and same tile that was in the vendor management. You want to do bulk updates. You're able to do it. Back. Edit your contract risks, see all the vendors. Vendor onboarding information is obviously very important to you because this information is probably more the information you want than even vendor management. They're just collecting that information for you. Assessing the contract assessment information, view vendor risks and view contract risks. So again, you would have seen all of these in the vendor management desktop. And if we change our role just to the sponsor, this just gives you an update of pending requests. So here's your pending contracts. If you've requested the contracts that are pending, or the vendors that are pending, if it's a new vendor, would be in here. Pending contracts for purchase requests are in here. And as soon as they're approved, they will come off this list. There's the vendor management, or excuse me, the sponsor has no tiles for updating anything. They have no tiles for inputting anything. Typically a request comes from the sponsor to vendor management. It's typically in the form of an email, a call. So there didn't seem like there was a lot of use of putting some kind of a tile to create a request in here. Not saying you couldn't do it, but for this purpose of the model that we built, we just didn't build it in there.
With you to configure and integrate that solution into your business operations, we trying to understand what's your internal processes, policies, and standards are. So obviously some of those tiles on embed and initiation process for getting the new vendor, this could be up to the sponsor. This might be another key stakeholder in the place where you have. So again, whatever you see in here for the tiles and dashboards and what it looks like, as well as charts, that's the configuration and implementation work that we work with you guys to define. How do we fit that your internal operations? Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand it back off to you, Carol, to walk through just the governance of the governance workflow piece for what we've developed so far.
Thank you, Bruce. So Bruce has showed you the main functionality of the vendor management solution. I'd like to highlight you some of the automated capabilities that we have built and we have in QualiWare in order to maximize that vendor management work. So I'm assuming you guys can see my screen, can you?
Yeah, it looks fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So a couple of things I want to highlight. So again, here is the quick search for the vendors and contracts. And Bruce talked about, the concept that we have behind our solution. We want to have an ability to create the objects, bulk edit them, and then view or do the analysis of this information as you see on those tiles. So viewing, tracking, seeing the summaries of things that's happening in that repository. So two items I want to highlight is a governance workflow engine. And for those who don't know, governance workflow is our robotic process automation and automated workflow capabilities. So if you don't want to keep sending people reminders about, hey, can you take a look at this particular vendor or this contract? When are you gonna able to send your response or your feedback on that? Our system is able to automate that process. So when I click on that particular vendor onboarding info matrix and I click on ACB communications, this is going to open the profile for that particular vendor. And you will notice that we see who is the sponsor, what's the vendor type, what's the status of that particular vendor is, what's associated documents. And then we will notice over here the exclamation mark. And for those who haven't seen the exclamation mark, this is our governance workflow I was talking about. So you will notice that currently this particular vendor is in a sponsored status. So he's just right in the infancy of beginning of all of the vendor onboarding process we have in place. You will notice that there are a few roles or actors that have to make a decision based on whether, this vendor particularly moves throughout the workflow. So there's internal sponsor, which we talked about, vendor manager, risk and compliance officers. Again, it goes back to the vendor management, internal sponsor as well for the final assessment. And then the internal sponsor makes the decision whether it's approved or rejected. There's also some things like those red arrows that we built that could reverse back the process of bringing us back if there's certain information missing, or let's say they did not fit the risk criteria that risk and compliance officer had in place. They could be rejected right on the spot. So once I click on that, I will send it to the handling and the information gets updated. You will notice that I no longer have access to the governance workflow. That means that now the decision is with somebody else. Somebody else in the food chain needs to make a decision based on based on this vendor and the information that I submitted to them. In the governance history, obviously, there has got to be information about Bruce, who has sponsored that particular vendor, as well as myself, who essentially moved the stage for the vendor from sponsor to pending approval. That's for the that's for the vendors itself. Now, whenever we move stuff, there's a triggers in place, right? We want to automate that process. We want to make sure that people get notifications with the right pieces of the information, and then they have their to-dos, they have their tasks, they know what they need to do, so you don't have to chase them, 500 times with emails saying, have you done that? So here was one of the examples of the emails that would be sent, was sent to us actually. So notification about contract management. You have the list of the stakeholders who should be aware of that particular contract, and then you need to review that contract. Here is the link to that contract. All of that, again, is fully configured and customized based on your internal operations, what kind of format you want to have, what type of information should be included in those automated notifications. The other part is we didn't want to build the process just and the governance workflow just for the actual vendor. We also wanted to have it for the contract. And the contract and the vendor could go for the completely different approval stages. Again, your internal business operations would govern that, but we realized that process might be different. You might approve the vendor. You might not necessarily approve a number of contracts that are associated with that particular vendor. So when I go to the actual, I'm going to click contract assessment info. That pulls me the information about the contracts that Bruce have highlighted. And when I click on one of those, this is going to give me information about the contracts. Again, you have short description, you have some attributes about it, what's the cost associated, what's the start date, termination date, and so on. And then here's you have a governance and acknowledge history again in place. So when I click on the exclamation mark, this will open a completely different automated governance workflow from what you've seen before. We have, somebody who is responsible for the contract. We have a number of people that this contract should be circulated to. We also then, that goes back to the contract responsible for a person for renegotiation or setting that it's a valid contract, as well as retiring or expiring this, notifying when this contract gets expired. So again, the goal is to say that there's not such a thing as one box fits it all. We would have different governance workflows as well as automated tasks and actions enabled for particular objects. And that would be contract, and that would be vendor. That could also be documents. That could also be processes or policies that you might need to review. Again, the governance workflows and automated steps would be different. So in a nutshell, that's what we have built. It's really, we see that easy to use, easy to read system where you can onboard new vendors, make sure that they have all of the relevant vendor risks information, compliance information. You're able to conduct a contract assessment. You're able to track those active contracts. Again, what Bruce just showcased you here right now, this is golden for somebody that, Bruce mentioned that he has encountered many situations where somebody's past due. How do we know that? Where is this information located? Again, this is a centralized source of truth for you guys to find all of that information relevant. Last but not least, I will bring this process one more time, just for you guys to understand that the vendor management could be very complex, and it's a broad term. It could be different, and it would be different from organization to the organization. And then our goal was to really take all of that complex and comprehensive process and this BPMN diagram that you see and build those nice to use, nice to analyze, and easy to understand tiles and dashboards that the vendor team as well as procurement teams are able to use. Are there any questions, any comments about the tool, about the solution we just showcased you?
Thank you, Carol. I don't see anything in the chat just yet, But while we're waiting to see if anybody has any questions, we do also have a summary of the vendor management benefits reference document that I'm just going to pop into the chat. If you're able to download it, great. If you run into some trouble with that, we'll include it in the recording, or you can reach out to me separately to receive a copy of it. So it's just a handy dandy one pager with all of the lovely benefits of.
So the other component of this that we foresee being valuable in vendor management here, right? It's all about supply chain management. Who is our supply chain? You know, what are they providing to us? Now let's take it and look at it from a sustainability perspective. When an organization needs to look at the sustainable practices that are coming from their suppliers, people that supply information to them. And QualiWare has that sustainability management component built into it because it comes from Europe with the sustainability reporting requirements that are in place there. So you could tie this supply chain management component to sustainability to get a better picture of how your organization is evergreening, you know, not just within the technology base, but overall. So I guess a further extension, possible extension to something like this.
Okay.
But at least if you are interested in viewing the solution, or if you think some of your fellow colleagues in procurement and vendor management are interested in exploring this tool, let us know. We'll be happy to organize the demo or even a guided trial in our environment to play with the tool.
I have a slide up on my screen for my colleague, Michael Rowe, who's going to show us some fun things. Michael, whenever you are ready, you can take over the screen.
Great. So yeah, I'm going to be going into, as the slide shows, Power BI integration with the QualiWare API. Now this is actually, there's a number of processes to it. So before we dive into the technicals of it, let's look at some of the business value. So I'm going to share my screen and go through a little bit of a presentation on that. Okay, can you see my screen okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is, again, the same diagram just to show that we're going to be, the goal is to get Power BI into our QualiWare architecture to get insights on QualiWare data. And so, again, the value of this is to get business insights on QualiWare information, so we don't have to reuse our business logic while, leveraging the power of Power BI and allowing better access to, or let's just say alternative options for doing modeling, because QualiWare certainly has its strengths for large-scale modeling in your existing ecosystem. Okay, so why do we do this? Some of the first reasons are we can get live data. So these are not snapshots of your QualiWare data when you're in your Power BI reports. This is live refreshes of your data that you can have access to in real time so that you can make faster decision making. You can get additional visibility. So obviously you have your QualiWare visibility to your repository and your QualiWare integrations, but by using Power BI, we have different visibility options for showing our models. We can also improve our collaboration. These reports can be, you can use your Microsoft ecosystem to take these reports, share them across your team or to other teams, and so that you can easily share your reports that show your QualiWare data, and you can then show that within QualiWare, that same Power BI report, and you can even share externally to your organization. Although I'll go into the different approaches to doing that. Obviously, there are some privacy trade-offs to sharing externally, but then you can still have your QualiWare report from QualiWare's API as you can still have your QualiWare data in a Power BI report and share that externally as a public URL. So again, because we're doing this automated process of reusing our business logic and easily importing it into Power BI, we're reducing our work, right? We're automating the process, reducing errors, saving time, and getting better analysis. So less manual work on that. Okay. So this is a screenshot of the report that was prepared. This was prepared by our new intern at CloseReach, Nathan Montpremier. So I wanted to say thank you to Nathan for preparing the report. He did a great job with that. I will show the report live in a moment, but as you can see, this is a screenshot right from Power BI. It has access to various QualiWare fields, and there's much more than that. You can access any object in your repository. You can create, you can access not just so you can reuse your business logic by accessing generic queries. That QualiWare's API allows that, but you can also run QSQL queries to, for example, in this case, we're getting all of the project objects, and we're going to then use Power BI to filter on that based on on names, dates, and whatnot. So some of the key features and functionality of this, again, is that it allows you to search and filter QualiWare model data from Power BI. And then you can create and manage custom Power BI dashboards. Anybody familiar with Power BI knows that you can easily swap from one chart to another. So there is a great amount of power in that. You can link reports to specific architecture objects or diagrams. Any objects within your repository, including governance history. So you can see here, this is some of the governance fields. On this audit CM is the name of the person who had changed that particular object, as well as that would be the change name, the modified name, or sorry, the creation name, audit creation name, modified name, and the current approval state of that object. This is governance history, as well as other fields for that object. And again, you can embed these reports live within your QualiWare web views. So that is very powerful. As you'll see, it's easy to integrate. You can make them secure and private to your organization or public and have them live. Through this, by having this access, you can monitor the performance metrics tied to your processes or capabilities. You can export and share filtered insights across teams, drill down into detailed model attributes directly from reports. So you have that. You have full access to the Power BI report from QualiWare, so you can do you have all of the functionality to filter right from your web page. And then again, you can, as another use case, you could track changes and trends over time with visual history and analysis. So yeah, there's a lot to it. And I do want to mention that this presentation is also on using QualiWare's API in general. So imagine that you can also take some of these endpoints and apply it to other integrations. I'd like you to just keep that in mind, because yeah, the sky's the limit. So before I go into the demonstration, I do want to mention that I've also prepared, and I've shared to some of our clients, a documentation, which is, I'll show just for a moment, but it really goes through a step-by-step how to set up this process, break it down, so you know exactly what you need to do to get to the end goal. And I'll just show you that document for a moment. So this, as you can see, it goes everything from software installation. We use Postman. So Postman is a tool for testing APIs. So I'll go into that a little bit as well. installing Power BI, setting up Postman, and some of the settings that you have limitations on. So one thing I want to point out is that so from my knowledge, not every environment has to do this, but you might need to disable a particular setting in your app services for your web application, which is to click allow on unauthenticated access. Now, you might be wondering if that's a problem, right? So first of all, bear in mind that you will still have QualiWare's authentication. So you're not removing authentication to your QualiWare website. There will still be full authentication. In addition, you can enhance the security of your web application by applying a couple of Azure services. One's called Azure Private Link. The other one is called Azure API Management. And not Azure Private Link, Azure Front Door or API Management. That's beyond the scope of this guide, but I just wanted to let you know that those are some of the other options you can do. But again, there is security even if you have to disable this setting. Okay.
Michael, Mike
Yes.
Hart, there is somebody with their hand up. Mike Hart, did you have a question?
Yes, Mike.
Yes, just a short question, Michael, because I know that we can link Power BI to QualiWare so that we can access QualiWare reports. But I think what I'm understanding is that we can go back and forth, right?
That's right.
Because although QualiWare can make charts, it's great at making charts. Power BI, that's their thing. And so there's a lot of different things that Power BI can do that we won't necessarily be able to do in QualiWare. But this allows the opportunity to just continuously, you're putting your data into QualiWare and it continuously goes to Power BI and then links back again.
That's right, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And of course, QualiWare has their own integration options. So for example, QualiWare allows you to access external data sets. So this approach is using, first of all, being outside of QualiWare, accessing data within QualiWare, but you can also do the reverse where perhaps there's a data source you're using for your Power BI reports. You can directly do a data source connection to that from QualiWare and pull that data in as well. So you actually have bidirectional communication between Power BI and QualiWare. So yes, it's fully integrated. Okay, so going back to this document, and I'll just go quickly through it. It goes into setting up Power BI, some of the examples of using and there's particular ways to set up the code, transform your data, how you need to enter your website domain, your username and password. It goes into all of that and how to set up the code. Putting your repository ID, configuration ID, lays it all out for you. Additionally, you do need to set up, this is important, I'll just go over this quickly. So you do need to set up a particular way of connecting. You need to choose anonymous connection in Power BI, and usually organization is what your organization is set to. And that will allow you to connect to QualiWare's API for your particular organization. And from there, then you can do your queries to access QualiWare's data and start to prepare your reports. So, and there are some particularities of it. So I invite you to look at this document to see some of those particular ways you might need to transform your data. As people know that who are familiar with preparing reports in Power BI, sometimes you need to, for example, unlock, QualiWare might return a record, which is an object, and you need to do a particular transform to get the underlying parameters behind it. And this explains how to do such an example. Okay, so let's go over to the demonstration on this. And of course, if there's any questions, please enter them into the chat or just raise your hand. Okay, so now I'm over in Power BI, and you can see all of this data that I've been able to attain, and what I can show you is that I had to write a number of queries, and the code returned back basically JSON, a JSON structure, and then you can use Power BI to clean it up into a nice table, right? So in this case, this particular query, as you see here, it's actually using one of QualiWare's APIs called get generic query. So this is how you can reuse your business logic. You don't have to, you can design all of your logic within QualiWare and then not have to redo that work in Power BI. You can recreate the reports or, build off of your existing reports and queries within QualiWare. And this is how you would do it using this particular endpoint called get generic query full. And what this one does is it actually returns, well, I'll just show you in QualiWare. I think that's even easier. So it's actually, this is, anybody familiar with our discovery repository, you might see that this is the compliance management page. We have a particular report called the workflow diagram status. And this has the particular, states of a particular workflow. And, there's a duplicate here, but as you can see, that it shows a nice chart of the different states that a chart might have. And you'll see that it has so if you see, I'm going to go into QLM for a moment. Apologies if I'm jumping around too much, but this is the generic query for that actual report. So the report calls this generic query with this object ID. So why is that important? Well, actually, you can do the same thing in Power BI to call this particular generic query by supplying this object ID to it, or you can also do the same in Postman. And the reason I'm showing you Postman is just, this is an easy way before you get into Power BI of making sure that you're actually executing your queries correctly before you get it, because it's a lot simpler to use. So again, this is the same object ID. It's that get generic query endpoint, again on discovery. I'm actually using some environment variables, and I do invite you to, if you're doing any development in here, save your session IDs, and you can save your variables like configuration IDs for particular repositories and the session ID. And well, I can tell you what the session ID is. So basically, when you first connect to QualiWare, you need to run what's called a login endpoint, and it gives you a session ID that you see here at the bottom. So what I've done is in Postman, I've stored it into I've run a particular script that I'm not going to go to the body, but it actually passes your username and password to QualiWare. It logs you in, it returns a session ID, and this session ID is needed in all future endpoint calls. So that's kind of the process. You call the login, you get your response with the session ID, and then you call your next endpoint. For example, get generic query. And then I've stored that session ID, and now I will show you an example of calling this particular endpoint. So now this endpoint is going to take that session ID for a particular repository and configuration, take the object ID, and return back all of that JSON for all of your projects. And if you notice, this is actually the same data that it was here. It's the exact same data for it. Yes, this one's the exact same data for this. And then again, it's cleaned up. And as you can see, this, so I didn't prepare a report on this particular one, but I will show you the report and the data underlying it. But you can just see that, again, these are some of the names of the different states. You can see the count of that of the objects that are in those states. So there's 5, 113, and 2. And if you look over here, you should see the state. So approved, development, and finish, which is, if you look back at this, that's what this chart is showing. You can see the numbers will add up to those particular states. So let's go back to Power BI. So you can see again that I have one particular query calling this endpoint to use your existing business logic to call the get generic query endpoint for that previous report. But again, you can use QSQL to call and get all of, for example, all of your projects. So this is all of the projects in the repository. You can see the names of the projects, you know, the template, all of the information that's filled in for that particular object. And I've done some transformations on this to get the underlying parameters, but again, I go into that in the description, in the documentation for that. So there you go. And so let's switch over to Power BI, to the report itself. So this is a couple of reports that I prepared on. Oh, sorry, again, Nathan has prepared on. I prepared some other reports. This one he did on the project information. So here we have, again, we have information like the short description, start and end dates. You can filter. He's put some filters that you can change. This is all dynamic. You can switch by person, and it will just show the objects that you modified. And so these are all the ones that I've modified. Remove those filters, and you can basically select that for anybody that has accessed or worked on this particular repository. Check change by state. Look at all the information you want. Look at a particular object ID. And of course, you still have access to Power BI's ability to change the reports on the fly. You could select a report and change it. And now I'm not going to do that. It might break something, but it's often quite easy to take a particular chart and change it into, for example, a pie chart. So that's very powerful about Power BI. And if you want to change the fields, you have access to all of your QualiWare data right here. So for example, here's some of the fields in that particular generic query. Here is some fields that were filtered on. And here's the full list of project fields that you could add in and, you know, make new reports on. So now we have a report. So what are we going to do with it? How do we get into QualiWare, right? How do we get our QualiWare business logic back inside so that our QualiWare users can view these Power BI reports and make use of them? So the one way is that you can share. You can make a link. So you'll see I'm not signed in, but if you're signed in, you can share within your organization, and you can manage the access of who within your organization you want to be able to see that report. And that's very important, because even if the user has access to the repository, they don't have access to the report that you've made. So you need to make sure that any users you want to be able to see the report within the repository, you manage the access for them. You can also publish it to the web, and actually that's done through the yeah, again, there's a way that you can do it here, and because I'm not signed in, I'm not going to do that. But by publishing, you can share it as a public URL, which you can also put in QualiWare. But again, there is a chance that your business data might be exposed to third parties. So just take that in mind. Okay, so let's switch over to QualiWare now. Now you might be, this is actually our previous report that we've shown. This is a public report. So this did not use any QualiWare data. This was just a report that was created and integrated into QualiWare. And that's great as well. It allows you to build your reports. It might not be tied to QualiWare necessarily, but it allows you to then publish them and share them within QualiWare. Now, the new solution is, and I apologize, it's just, I made a basic chart here, but is you can link to the report from one of your fields, usually the description. So you might have a model, and in that model, you can highlight it or click on it, and you can see the description that has the link to your Power BI report. If you do so, it will prompt you to sign in because you're not authenticated yet. And the good news is it should just detect your single sign-on for your account and give you access to the report right from QualiWare. So again, you have full functionality just as before. There's also, you can have other reports. This one, for example, is some analytics on the owner as opposed to by projects by ID. And so you can break down that information and have a nice way to integrate within QualiWare. So other than that, there are other ways you can call QualiWare's API from Power BI. So I'll just quickly show you some of the operations. And I know this is a long list, but you'll be able to access, this is part of the documentation package. It's also, if you've used QDO extended before, which I'll just show you for a moment. This is QDO extended. It's a way to test using QualiWare's API from your browser. And it has various examples of some of the calls you can do. It shows you easy ways to try out the API, getting configuration data, getting object data, and by doing so, you can make sure that the API calls you make within Power BI and within Postman are done properly, and you can test in that manner. So often what I'll do is I'll try out an API call from QDO extended, then I'll inspect it to see what parameters it's passing. Then I'll go over to Postman and pass those same parameters and make the call, make sure it's executing properly, and then I'll make it in Power BI. And so, yeah, that's kind of the process that I go into. And again, yeah, so there's a large list of API calls. You can pass your data as JSON. You can pass it as XML. You can find objects, filter by objects, do QSQL calls, find what links to an object, for example. Really, the possibilities are endless of what you can do in terms of making your business logic for Power BI accessing your QualiWare data. Yeah, so that's about it. I think if there are any questions, please feel free to let me know. But thank you.
So this was a pretty technical presentation, everyone. So if there are any requirements for us to show you at a higher level, sort of how some of this will work, or at a lower, more detailed level with some of your internal technical people, we have no problems with setting up meetings to do that.
Thank you.
That's right.
So we do have a few questions. So Michael, great presentation. You captured everybody's attention because here we are at 4:30 and everybody's still on the call.
Good, good.
So I see, Hisham, you had your hand raised. Did you want to start? And then I do see that there's
Okay.
something in the chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael, for your
Oh, you're welcome.
presentation. It was amazing.
Thank
Is it
you.
possible you share with us this API integration documentation, if it's possible, and some examples of the Power BI queries?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, I've prepared what a documentation package, and includes this this document, which again shows you everything from preparing your queries, the whole process, setting up Azure, working in Postman, and in this package, I've also included some sample queries as well. A query for how to set up your get generic query endpoint within Power BI, also the query for transforming that data, and also a query for a QSQL query, and how to transform that QSQL query. So I've actually included 4 different code samples for you. Yeah, and then how
Thank
to
you.
publish it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike.
You're welcome. Yes.
Maget, does that answer your question as well? There is documentation, yes.
Yes, yes. We have everything you need, I think, for in terms of preparing the documentation. But yes, of course, if you have the documentation, you still have questions, please feel free to reach out, and we can arrange something to give further guidance on how to go forward with using the tool.
So one of the key areas we see for this, because we see a lot of people document a lot of processes. So taking a look at all of those processes that are across my organization and trying to gather, some statistical information, some relationship information across all of that. That kind of analysis can be done quite easily in Power BI. So, being able to pull those, and we have lots of organizations with 800 and 1,000 processes. To do those, to analyze some of that information or query some of that in different ways in QualiWare can be difficult. So we see Power BI as a way to help analyze your repository and help you understand, the information that is there and how you might use it more effectively.
Carol, you have your hand up. Carol, did you have something?
But Kevin jumps in all over the place and stole my idea. Okay, Kevin, you said exactly what I was gonna say. But in reality, our team have spent a lot of time on getting this integration to the condition where we can say, listen, here is the complete integration. Here is the complete documentation, guys. Take it and essentially maximize the potential and the benefit from having the Power BI and QualiWare stacked together. So yeah, thank you.
And I
Maget,
guess there is one other piece to this as well. Figuring out how to use the open API capabilities within QualiWare to actually test and generate, the JSON and things like that are coming through some of this. So, and again, modeling those interfaces within QualiWare so that everybody understands what is available that they can use, within their organization. So
That's right.
great.
Yeah, and absolutely, the integration features that QualiWare are bringing out are going to continue to develop and improve, and so who knows, maybe something in 10.10 might help. Yeah, I think the power of this is going to continue to grow and benefit all of its users.
So guys, we've come to the end of our user group meeting for June. I will have to let you all go so that you can go out and enjoy the 47-degree with humidity heat here in Ottawa. We've beaten Toronto. It's 47 degrees with humidity. So I'm going to have to let you all go to enjoy that. see you guys in September, when hopefully it will be a little bit less warm at that point. So we're going to break for the summer. The next meeting is going to be the September the 30th, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. We're lining up an agenda for that meeting already. If there are things that you would like to hear more about, please let us know. If you have things that you would like to present about what your teams are doing with QualiWare, we would be very happy to hear about that and have you participate in our user group meeting. I would make a pretty strong assumption that our September meeting will be focused on the new things that we've learned about 1010, because hopefully we have all of July and August and September to learn lots and lots about that, and we'll come back in September and share that with you. Thank you very much for participating in our user group meetings this year. Thanks for our new clients who have joined us and participate as well. Agriculture Canada and Transport Canada joined us in the last couple of months. And of course, Transport joined us last fiscal year, but Agriculture and Environment Canada joined us this year. Government of Nova Scotia has been attending our meetings. So it's really great to have you guys here, and we hope to hear you come back, and participate with us in September. Contact information is on the slide. You guys know where to reach us, and the meeting will be posted up on our YouTube channel within the next week or so. So thanks very much, everybody. Enjoy your summer. If anybody wants to share what they're going to be doing, you can put that in the chat as we wrap things up. I'm going to Newfoundland in September. If anybody else wants to share, you can. Thank you.